Today we are on lesson 107 in book 4. The title of this lesson is Adding and Subtracting Fractions with Common Denominators. Parents, I want to draw your attention to this little ditty up here. Randy Palasock TED Talk. If you Google search that, it's about an 8-minute TED Talk. The title of it is Math is Not Hard, It's a Language. And it changed the way that I teach this lesson, and it really changed how I think about teaching fractions to kids and math to kids in general. It's excellent. You're going to see a lot of what he talks about in that video here in this lesson today, but parents, if you want to watch it for yourself, or if you're a high school kid that came across this channel, Randy Palasock TED Talk, look it up. Okay, so adding and subtracting fractions with common denominators. We're going to take it all the way back to first grade, and we're going to start by just adding simple numbers. If I ask, what is 1 apple plus 1 apple, what would you tell me the answer is? Nyla?
2 apples.
It's 2 apples. Most of you, all of you in 4th grade, don't even need to think about that because you've been adding 1 plus 1 for years. So what if I change it? Instead of 1 apple, now I'm going to add 1 pencil plus 1 pencil. Nyla, what do you get this time?
Well, the number is the same, but the label is different. Instead of apples, this time it will be pencils.
So how many pencils do I have?
2 pencils.
I have 2 pencils. Okay, now what if I change it to fractions? Now, can you tell me what 1/3 plus 1/3 is?
It's the same. The label is different, but the number is the same. 2/3.
2/3. Okay, so here I wrote it with words. I'm going to change it and show you what it looks like as a fraction. 1/3 plus 1/3. There's my 1/3. Here's my other 1/3. Equals my answer, 2/3. Okay? You just added fractions, a 4th grade Common Core standard. 1/3 plus 1/3 equals 2/3. It's not hard when you think about it with the words as opposed to looking at the numbers. We're adding one of the same thing plus something else of the same thing, so we end up with 2 of them. Okay, so I'm going to stick with my apple analogy here. If I have 1 apple plus 1 apple, I get 2 apples. What happens if I have 1 apple plus 1 banana? It's still 1 plus 1. Do I have 2 apples now? No, I don't have 2 apples. Do I have 2 bananas now?
No.
What do I have, Nyla?
Well, you still have 2, but it's not specifically apples or bananas.
So what would you say? If I said I have 1 apple plus 1 apple, I'm sorry, not 1 apple. If I have 1 apple plus 1 banana, what do I have now?
2 fruits.
Oh, she changed it to something they have in common. She doesn't have 2 apples. She doesn't have 2 bananas. She has 2 pieces of fruit. She figured out what these 2 things have in common and answered it that way. That's brilliant. And when we move on to adding and subtracting fractions with different denominators, we're going to come back to this analogy. For today, we are sticking with the same denominator, so we're going to look at several examples, okay? Several word problems to start with. Blake mixed 3/5 of a pound of cashews with 1/5 of a pound of pecans. What is the weight in pounds of the cashews and the pecan mixture? So he mixed them together, which means, Nyla, should we add or subtract?
We should add.
We should add, since he's putting them all together. That's a key word for adding. So we have 3/5 plus 1/5. We're adding the same item. So what is 3 pencils plus 1 pencil?
That is 4.
4 what?
4 pencils.
4 pencils. What is 3 apples plus 1 apple?
4.
4 what?
4 apples.
So what is 3/5 plus 1/5?
4/5.
Correct. This would be our answer to that problem. Actually, it's a word problem, so it's 4/5 of a pound. Okay, example number 2. To make a small bow for a present, Denitra cut 1/5 of a yard of ribbon from a length of ribbon that was 3/5 of a yard long. What is the length of the ribbon that was not used for the bow? So I'm going to put 3/5 over here because I know what's coming. Okay, she had a total of 3/5 of a yard. She cut off 1/5 of a yard. And the question wants to know, what is the length of the ribbon that was not used? This is what was used for the bow. So we have to figure out what was not used. Nyla, is that going to be an addition or subtraction problem?
This is subtracting because you got rid of some instead of adding it.
Exactly. So, Nyla, what are 3 apples minus 1 apple?
3 apples minus 1 apple would be 2 apples.
What are 3 pencils minus 1 pencil?
2 pencils.
So what are 3/5 minus 1/5?
2/5.
2/5. And in this case, we're talking about a yard, so we'll label it. Okay? Example 3. This one is not a word problem, so I'll just write it up on the board. We have 2 3/5, a mixed number, plus 3 1/5. Okay, just like when we're adding multi-digit numbers, we have to add the ones, then we have to add the tens, then we have to add the hundreds. Here, we're going to add the fractions. You might want to rewrite it. It's up to you how you choose to solve it, but you could write it as 2 3/5 like this, plus 3 1/5 like this. With fractions, to me, this is not as necessary, but if this helps you out, absolutely rewrite it vertically, okay? So, what I do know is that I need to add my fractions first. I'm going to ignore my 2 and my 3, and I'm just going to add 3/5 and 1/5. Can you tell me what that is, Nyla?
4/5.
3/5 plus 1/5 is going to give me 4/5. Now I can add my ones. 2 plus 3 gives me 5. So our final answer is 5 4/5.
We don't need to put the fifths word there because
I have it as a number, right?
Uh-huh.
Exactly. Okay, our next example is a subtraction one, very similar to what we just did. 5 2/3 minus 1 1/3. So, same way we did with the addition. First, we're going to look at the fraction. What is 2/3 minus 1/3?
1/3.
It is 1/3. And now, what is 5 minus 1?
4.
So our answer is 4 1/3. Okay, our final example is another word problem. In the race, Martin rode his bike 7.5 miles. And then he ran 2.5 miles. Altogether, how far did Martin ride his bike and run? Altogether is your key word there. What does that mean, Nyla?
It means when they're combined.
combined, so what symbol are we going to use here?
Plus.
We are going to add 7½ plus 2½. So Nyla, what is 1/2 plus 1/2?
Well, we could say 2 halves, but 2 halves equals 1 whole.
So Nyla just exactly explained that. We could say 2 halves, but in 4th grade we know that 2 halves is the same thing as 1 whole. So
when the two numbers are the same, then that means it's equal to 1 whole.
When the numerator is the same as the denominator, you've got the whole thing every time. Okay? So we know that these are equal to 1 to 1, right? So now we need to add 7 plus 2 plus we need to add the 1 that these 2 halves account for. So what is 7 plus 2 plus 1?
That is 10.
That is 10, and it's a word problem. It would be 10 miles. He ran and biked for a total of 10 miles. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to put up a couple of problems for lesson practice. If you would like to pause the video after I get them all up on the board and try them on your own, when you hit play again, we'll go over the answers together. So, okay, if you will take a look at those, try them on your own, and when you hit play again, we'll talk about the answers. Okay, Nyla, what is 1/3 plus 1/3?
2/3.
Oops, 2 is not very pretty. There we go. Nyla, what's 1/4 plus 2/4?
3/4.
3/10 plus 4/10?
7/10.
2/3 minus 1/3?
1/3.
3/4 minus 2/4?
1/4.
9/10 minus 6/10?
3/10.
Okay, now we're going to get into the mixed numbers. So remember, we want to add the fractions first. So what's 1/4 plus 2/4?
1/4 plus 2/4 is 3/4.
And then what is 2 plus 4?
6/4.
So we have 6 and 3/4 for G. What is 3/8 plus 2/8?
That is 5/8.
And then 5 plus 1?
6.
Here, we have just the whole number 8. There's no fraction. But we're adding 1 and 2/5. So we're going to keep my 2/5 as our fraction. And then what's 8 plus 1?
9.
9 and 2/5 for our answer there. Okay, moving on to J. Now we're subtracting. What's 3/5 minus 1/5?
That is, hold on, just give me a minute. 2/5.
2/5. And 4 minus 1?
3.
Okay, 3/4 minus 2/4.
1/4.
And 9 minus 4.
5.
Do you guys see why it's good to have your math facts memorized? If I had to think about what 9 minus 4 was, that would make this problem a lot more difficult. And looking at L, 8/9 minus 3/9.
5/9.
And then 12 minus 3.
9.
Okay? So, those are our lesson practice answers. There are 2 more lesson practice word problems. Problem M. Let me erase this so we have some space. Okay, problem M in words says, how much is 3/8 plus 4/8? So it's written like this. I don't think I spelled that right.
Me neither.
I didn't. Let's try that again.
I think you're missing a number.
E-I-G-H-T. And then just another H-S. Okay, so 3/8. Did that here too. Plus 4/8. What do you get, Nyla?
That's 7/8.
So you could write it like this, or you could write it in words. It doesn't specify. Good luck with spelling eighths. It's a tricky one. And then the final one says the troop hiked to the end of the trail and back. If the trail was 3.5 miles long, how far did the troop hike? Okay, so we have a trail that's 3.5 miles. When in doubt,
draw it out.
Draw it out. So they're hiking along a trail. We'll say this dotted line is the path. Okay, and this trail is 3.5 miles. They start here, they end here, but once they get to the end, then they turn around and go back. So Nyla, how would I set up that problem to figure out the total amount of miles that they hiked?
Well, whatever way they go, it's still hiking the same amount of miles.
Okay.
So we could do that 3.5 miles plus 3.5 miles, but we could also do that as a multiplication problem.
Ooh, we could, but since we haven't learned how to multiply fractions or mix numbers yet, we're going to stay away from that one for now, okay? So yes, they hiked 3.5 miles there, then they hiked 3.5 miles back. So here's the addition problem that we're solving, and we know that 1/2 plus 1/2 is
equals 1 whole.
Equals 1 whole. Plus we're going to add the 3, plus we're going to add this 3, so for a total of
that's 7.
7 miles. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of our lesson. If you are my student, now's the time that you should work on written practice. It begins on page 678. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon, and I'll see you soon.